Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back to this month's Recruiter Table Talk. I'm Kathleen Duffy, the president and CEO of Duffy Group, headquartered here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. I don't know about you, but I feel like blink, it's the fourth quarter, it's the middle of October. Like, where did the year go? And so we're here to talk about conversations that we need to all be having with hiring leaders about their headcount for 2024. So today our topic is hiring preparation and what to do now to hire new employees in 2024. So I want to tell you, I was at a conference in Denver just a couple months ago in September, and Governor Paulus spoke to the group, and he talked about a variety of different topics that's going on in Colorado. But one of the things that he talked about was the labor shortage, and he said that there are 2 openings for every 1 unemployed person. And I'm sure that that is not an unusual statistic in the areas where you are living. The Bureau of Labor Statistics say the U.S. economy is projected to add 4.7 million jobs in the next 10 years. But the big challenge is that baby boomers are retiring, and that there's fewer workers coming up in these new generations, especially our Gen Zers. And now there's talk about this forever labor shortage. There's just fewer people that are going to be working by the end of the decade. And, unfortunately, we can't change that paradigm that we have, the demographic paradigm. But what we can do, what we can control is that strategy, that recruiting strategy, so that we are more proactive around all of this. So I'm here today with 3 of my practice leaders. I have Sharon Grace, who is in beautiful southern New Mexico, and Colleen Neese and Kristen Posen are here with me in the Phoenix market. And they're here to share some tips and some strategies that'll really help you to tee up the conversations that you're going to be having with your hiring leaders. So Sharon, can you kick us off here on how do we get started?
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, what a year. Another year just flew by. And this year, hiring was still pretty strong. There was a lot of hiring need, still a lot of challenges, a lot of open positions. Some took longer to fill. Some still remain open. I'd say we all did a lot of, pivoting and lots of pirouettes throughout the year. But here's a word that I've used a few times here. There's a mismatch still with the supply and demand. And I know we've heard the term supply and demand for the past few years. We get it. I enjoy it because I'm one of those economic geeks. But with a little bit of planning, and this is the time of year for us to plan, to look forward to the next year and look for the success. So here's a few things to start to think about as you enter your preparation for a successful 2024. First is the looking back. I mean, it seems to be, a common thing in any even personal goals. What worked this year? What did we do? How many pivots and pirouettes did we do? And were they on point? So if you have an internal recruiting team, I'd say this is a great time to gauge what the hiring managers, their level of satisfaction, how was that match, that partnership with the internal recruiting? How were the efforts? What were the outcomes? So meet with your hiring managers to get their perspectives. So this information will only help guide you, and you have time to make any corrections needed to plan accordingly for next year. Look at the timelines that maybe it took to fill and so forth. Did your did your HR and leadership teams conduct a skills gap analysis this year? Typically, these take place, periodically, year round. It's important information. And many C-suites, CHROs, they do tend to conduct these year-end skill gap analysis to identify the immediate roles that are needed. Did new things come up? Were we running short, behind in one area where we were inefficient? This is a great time to have that outlook company-wide. And then a big question to ask, are your aces in their places? Catchy phrase. I learned this after speaking with someone a few years ago that started their career through the McDonald's leadership program. I believe they still use this today. So the managers use this on a daily basis. They come in, are my aces in my places? I think we can take a little bit, from that. So if you're missing an ace, what do you do about it? How do you go out to find that new ace? So maybe you can consider partnering with an external recruiting firm to potentially conduct a confidential search to replace someone, or perhaps conduct a talent market assessment to see even if there is a stronger ace out there. So maybe you might have that ace that just still needs to be developed more to become that strong ace. And then the scenario planning. Keep abreast of the state or the health of your company. How is the activity? How are sales? How about increased costs? What about the revenue, that bottom line? Create different scenarios for these unexpected changes. But again, keeping on top of it throughout the year. So nothing should just be a complete surprise, but this way you're able to make any quick adjustments. Again, back to the pivoting and the pirouettes if needed. Those contingency plans tend to help.
Well, I think you raised some really important points there, Sharon. And of course, I love your ballet analogies in there. But, and the first one you talk about is ask the hiring leader. And, that seems like, yeah, duh. Why wouldn't we do that? And I think the other piece that you talk about is don't assume. Right? Don't assume that everything went well or didn't go well. By asking those questions, you are able to get that information. Now, what was new to me as you were talking was the whole aces in their places. I had not heard that before. And so for others that may not have been familiar with that either, and looking at it and vetting out internal candidates versus external candidates in a confidential search, I imagine for some people that could be pretty tricky. I know you've been really successful in being able to maneuver that on both sides of the fence. Maybe you can tell the audience a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, I guess maybe we'll continue with the trend of the ace in their place. We do, unfortunately, confidential searches do come up, but it doesn't have to necessarily be an unfortunate thing. We all, I think, right? We strive to be an ace. We want to be the ace on our team, and we want our hiring leader to see us as that. And sometimes that's not the case. And I had a couple of examples this year. And one was, it started off as a confidential search, and it actually was a role in HR, believe it or not. And there were different scenarios. So the C-level team, there were a few of them, and they all had different opinions. And so this was a perfect opportunity. You really need to go external and find the right partner that can help provide that information so that they can make that strategic decision. And let's just see what the market tells us. So we went out to the market and we assessed. And they made a change internally as well. They brought on someone new to their department. And that was a good determining factor too, to complement the work that we were doing. Well, as it turned out, we identified different scenarios of different opportunities that could be. Could this be your new ace? And at the end of the day, after probably about a good 2 months, they decided that we're looking at our ace. The person's a little off, but this new person, now we see a team forming, and now we know the tools that we didn't have. And this helped them to identify that and move faster with that decision.
Wow, great example. Great example. Congratulations too.
Thank you.
Okay, so Kristen, we've looked back, we figured out what went right, what went wrong. Now we've got to capitalize on what we've learned from the past year. Talk to us a little bit about how we create that roadmap.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, putting together that roadmap, your 2024 hiring budget, whether you've started it today or you're going to hope to get to it in December, it's something that you really need to start working on now. It would be our recommendation. And really the best way to echo what Sharon was talking about is talking to those hiring leaders. Now you know what kind of went on last year. Now what are their expectations for the coming year? Getting together with them, your executive team, and really understanding, what the growth is expected to be in 2024, which business units are going to be affected by this. How does that then affect your headcount? And it could be anything from taking a look at, historical staffing levels. If we open up 2 more locations, or we're going to need, 20 more employees in this region. What are the turnover rates too? Because we are still seeing quite a bit of turnover. People are still leaving their jobs. So again, are there certain regions where the turnover is higher? You know that you're just going to need to be posting for positions more in those areas. And then any upcoming projects or initiatives that might impact staffing needs. Maybe you're rolling out a new software integration. I know we're doing that this year. So, how does that affect your workforce? Do you need to staff up a little bit more for that? Or is that new software going to create such efficiencies that maybe you might be letting people go? There's lots of reasons behind layoffs. So is that an expectation for the coming year? So just lots of different things to take a look at, measure, and then really making sure that the hiring leaders are on the same page as the C-suite moving forward. So having somebody like, a director of talent that brings people together to talk about these budgets before they get presented to the CFO, I think is really important. And then other factors like seasonality, market trends, I'll always keep those things in mind.
Yeah, some really terrific tips. And I think, again, it seems like the common ground is communication and talking. You mentioned educating, having the head of talent acquisition help educate on, the budgeting process. And so, what do you feel, you are a former human resources professional who sat in that seat. What are some of the biggest hurdles that these organizations or the hiring leaders face when they're starting the budgeting process?
Well, I think it really just boils down to being on the same page, like you said. If they're, looking at their balance sheet and they're, trying to reach a certain profit margin, what is it going to take to get there? Well, that can't be answered in a vacuum. It has to be answered when you as you speak with the entire C-suite, the hiring leaders. It needs to be a mutual conversation where you all can compromise, collaborate, and get to what the staffing levels really should be. And of course, you might have to adjust those as the year goes on, but getting on the same page is crucial.
Yeah, in any relationship, right?
Right.
And I think that's, I mean, we all wish we had a crystal ball, right? To be able to tell us a lot of different things, namely what the economy is going to end up doing, right? But, you talk about the staffing levels and the turnover rates and the reasons for those turnover rates, whether they're technology improvements or is it around, the leaders at the top, people leave because of the person that they work for. Talk to us a little bit about how to look at that, information, how to track that information so that we can be making better decisions.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's lots of different software tools that are out there, whether it's just using your HRIS, other databases based on how you collect your profitability. There's custom software that can be written, but really, I think you're hearing the word data analytics a lot lately, and they really are powerful. Data is really the most valuable thing in business today, is understanding your data, and because that can drive really what your growth is going to be, explain things that are going wrong, and people can see it, in a spreadsheet or in a report, and it all makes sense when it's all pulled together if you have the right software tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think data, some people can look at it in black and white, right or wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
we've all learned here at Duffy Group, data tells a lot of stories. And so I think it's really important. Again, it gets back to the communication and talking with your hiring leaders as to what this data is, so that you really understand what that story is, and if there is an issue especially from a turnover perspective. So Colleen, what else? There must be a few more things.
Yes, yes. And thank you, Kristen and Sharon. I really appreciate the suggestions that you've shared as well. But, just a few other things to keep in mind. One of them at the top of the list, I think this is probably going to be obvious to most people, but it's an important reminder that you really have to review your compensation and benefits. And you need to assess the current salary benefit situation. You need to make sure that you are planning for any salary increases, any bonuses. I mean, if this is all about planning for your budget and planning for 2024, you need to take in that information into account, because that's going to have a huge impact into your budget. So this will include accounting for any changes to the benefits packages too. So just crucial for estimating your future labor costs. But some other things to keep in mind in addition to comp and benefits. And by the way, before I move on from comp and benefits, I think one of the most valuable things that an organization can do is actually utilize a compensation survey, so that they know that their compensation and their benefits are competitive. As I work with a variety of clients, I have found that has been one of the key contributors to their success in hiring, is having their compensation and their benefits in line to where it should be for the market. But in addition to that, there's going to be other things to keep in mind. So you have to keep in mind temporary or contract labor costs, and track all of that and take that into account. Sometimes it's seasonal workers, or sometimes it's going to be for specific projects. So don't forget about that particular labor market. But then there's also going to be some of the non-labor type of expenses that need to be factored into the budget. And so these are things like, office space or equipment, or, as Kristen was talking about, the database that's being used and those types of tools. All of those need to be counted into the budget. Sometimes it's continuing education. Sometimes it's, certainly third-party recruiters. We've talked about that needs to be part of the budget. And speaking of the third-party recruiters, assessing what worked, what didn't work, and are you going to be renewing those contracts? That's going to be an important part. And when it comes to those third-party recruiters, what types make sense for your organization? And there are a variety. I mean, there's retained, there's contingency, there's temp to hire, and recruitment research, which is what Duffy Group does. So taking those factors into account. But then I also want to make sure to touch on job postings and what those costs are. They need to be part of that budget. And then tracking turnover and those types of costs. And then once you have all of this information, it's so important to communicate that. So you're going to want to make sure that your staffing plan is finalized and approved, and ongoing communication so that you can be as transparent as possible with your workers about that.
Yep. Once again, the common theme is communication. So, you talked about the compensation survey, and I will say that is something, as the owner of this business over here, something that I did. And it made a huge difference for us in terms of making sure that we were able to hire and, most importantly, retain the top talent that we have here. But, Sharon talked about the confidential search to make sure that they had their aces in their places. And you talked about the need for third-party recruiters for a variety of different things. Maybe you can, kind of highlight the differences and where they may play best, in a person's toolbox.
Sure. So I think that there could be a need for really all different types of recruitment models. I mean, there's, like you said, Kathleen, there's oftentimes just the smart move is to have each in your toolbox, and deciding when to work with a retained search firm versus a contingency search firm or versus a recruitment research. I think there's a number of factors, but I would describe retained as being, it is the most expensive recruitment option that's out there. And so that is typically going to be reserved for those C-level searches and oftentimes for those organizations that do have more money in their budget. So for example, I do a lot of work with nonprofit organizations, and they typically don't work with retained search firms because their money really needs to be going towards their mission, not towards their vendors. But I worked in retained for years, so I know that some of the pros and cons there. And so I think there's certainly a place for that type of model for those executive level positions. Contingency, I think, is one where it can be an option for all organizations, but I think it's really going to depend on the success that you're receiving from your contingent recruitment partner. And so oftentimes contingency is used as a bit of a supplement to what the internal HR department may be doing as well. And contingency is like, if you think along the lines like a car salesman or a realtor, they don't get paid unless they actually make the sale. Same thing with the contingency recruiters. You're only going to pay them if they actually bring you a candidate that fits your needs and someone that you hire. And then there's the recruitment research model, which is the model that we are here at Duffy Group. And I think that's one that is a unique model that, really came out of the idea that retained was, a very expensive option. So recruitment research is a more, it provides a really strong ROI and can be utilized at all levels. At C-level, I do a lot of CEO searches, as well as entry level. So that's another option as well. So it's important for, I think, hiring leaders to have relationships with all of them and utilize them depending on what their unique needs are.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you all. Let me see. Do we have any questions from the audience? I know we're coming up on our. How can recruitment research help us with the uncertainty of the market in 2024? Who'd like to take that one on?
I can take it on.
Okay. Go ahead, Kristen.
Well, I think, with recruitment research, you're taking a look at maybe a position today, and you're able to take that position, find the right candidates. You might hire one person today, and then you have a whole list of other candidates that you could also hire in 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, depending on what happens with the economy, right? So, and I think everybody wants to be optimistic, but there's a lot of pessimism that still is going on with the economy. But every month that goes by, the jobs report comes out, and there's continued growth. So knowing that if you work with somebody that is in this field, you're going to have a list of candidates that are already vetted out that you could be hiring in the future. So I think that would be an advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I think we have time for one more. Is there another question? I know one of them that we had was if we could give an example of a client who changed from a reactive strategy to a proactive strategy. And I think, Colleen, you had a really good example of that.
I do. Thank you, Kathleen. Yes, and so we were talking with a recent client, and had shared with them some strategies to employ throughout their organization in order to address recruitment and retention issues. And so one of those suggestions, I mean, we're all familiar with exit interviews, right? So somebody has decided to leave the organization, and so there'll be an exit interview that takes place to find out, what worked, what didn't work, why are you leaving? Well, that's very reactive. And so some organizations are implementing what are called stay interviews. So instead of exit interviews, you're going to actually meet with your team members, especially your high performers, and find out how everything is going. And that kind of information can really help you to be able to retain your top talent. And so that's just one example of being proactive versus reactive. And then the other suggestion that we had given and they implemented with very positive results was providing total rewards statements to their organizations. And so we all know we might get our paycheck and see that amount in our cash compensation, or we may know what we earn annually. However, one wonderful thing that hiring leaders and HR departments can do is put together these total reward summaries that are going to really encompass all of the benefits, all of the money that this company is investing in you. And so your health benefits, your retirement benefits, your wellness benefits, and it can be really eye-opening to an employee to review that total compensation summary and realize what they are earning beyond just the cash comp. And so, yes, Kathleen, I think that was just a wonderful experience for you and I to hear recently from a client that implemented those two strategies and came back to us and said that as a result, they've had 0% turnover from those two strategies.
Yeah, that was great. Great. So we've got just a quick time for Michael's question. And Sharon Grace, I was thinking, you love our storytelling, and Michael's question is, what steps will you take to strengthen our employer brand and attract top talent in 2024?
Yeah, that's my thought too. Thanks, Kathleen. It's the storytelling. Yes, I enjoy it. We all do it. We enjoy it too. That's part of our process, which makes it pretty unique. And not only are we putting together a story for our clients to help promote them. But also, I've shared before too about the hiring leader also. Sometimes that is can be a big selling point, especially if someone is changing industries. They have an interest in this particular industry, but they don't have the experience. And then here's a great hiring leader that they are respected in the industry and good at developing. So there are parts of stories, pages, chapters, whatever, to pull out.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. Well, our time is just about up. We've got this QR code. This is, if you'd like to receive some of the tips on how to create a recruiting budget, please go ahead and take that QR code. But I hope that you really enjoyed this month's Recruiter Table Talk. And of course, if you did, we ask you to please share that with others like yourself so that they can enjoy the show. We invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn and to follow Duffy Group on all the social media platforms. And as always, we're happy to continue this conversation with you and share resources, but we also want to learn from you as well. So until next month, take care.